Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Guru Kursuntsman, this is a reprint. It came out a long time ago, back in Throne of Eldraine, but this is the first time we're getting a full art treatment. It looks pretty dope. It's a little honey badger with horns. He's a very angry guy.
Honey badger don't care.
If you couldn't tell. The reason why he's significant is he dumps tokens into play and he protects himself. Planeswalkers that specifically do that are really powerful. It has some flexibility that you can destroy something and influence the board, and it lets you draw a card. It literally does everything you want it to be doing on a Planeswalker. Not all Planeswalkers do this. Its -6 is an ability that is static. It lasts forever. It lets you win the game because it gives your stuff +3/+3 and trample. Gormon's talent. Surprisingly, all of the classes from the set are really nice. I was genuinely surprised by all of these, and I kind of wish they, or hope in the near future, they come out with a legendary creature that cares about classes, because I feel like there's enough in the format now where you could support it. The only thing that's kind of strange about them is they fit typically very niche kind of decks, so if anything is holding that back from occurring, it's that factor. It's that there's not enough classes in a particular archetype that you want to be playing and building around. I hope they come out with a legendary creature that cares about advancing levels or accomplishing all the way to the end a class. This set, it's very Secret of Nim. You probably don't know.
Hello?
It was even before my time, but I watched it when I was a kid all the time. It's about anthropomorphic animals that are living out in nature, and there's this magical element, and they're trying to prevent the fields from being destroyed and being built up and urbanized, these animals that are living there. That's where a lot of this set's inspiration comes from. Actually, the first thing I thought of was South Park. As terrible as that is to admit, particularly season 15, episode 10, where they're trying to capture WikiLeaks, who is leaking people's secrets, and it's supposed to be like a joke about Snowden back in the day. There's these anthropomorphic spirit animals that died inside of Mr. Slave's large intestine. Katato fish, the Prince Sparrow, and King Frog.
Wonderwix, you are coming to the entrance of the small intestine. There you must seek out the Sparrow Prince.
And whenever you gain life, you get a 3/3 raccoon. When you advance to the next level, you gain all the previous effects, plus the bottom one. Whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on everything. Because the middle and the bottom ability trigger in life gain, you can actually layer the triggers to happen one before the other. Obviously, you'll want to put it in the 3/3 raccoon first, and then drop the +1/+1 counter, and then you may have a 4/4 on your hands, and that's how you want to do it. Diamond Raid, it's written in German, but I have a dedicated memory. It's a reprint. Gives creatures +1/+0, and then you can +1 to add a red and green to your mana pool to cast creatures, and then that creature can't be countered. Its -2 is have two creatures fight each other. Let's see if I remember that correctly. Yeah, I did. So I have a pretty good memory. Thickest in the Thicket. On ETB, you get to put X +1/+1 counters on target creature where X is the creature's power. And then beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with the greatest power tied for the greatest, you draw 2 cards. It's significant because it does something the turn you play it 2 times. This one's kind of cool. The Rolling Hamsphere. It's literally hamsters in a ball. There was a card that's like this. It's called Mer Battlesphere. These symbols here, there are like 3 subsets per set. So like Bloomburrow has a commander set, it has a regular set, and then it has a special guest set. And this is the commander set. These only come in the commander decks, but they also come in the collector boxes. In terms of what it does, it gets +1/+1 for each hamster you control. When it attacks, you create 3 red hamsters, and it deals X damage to any target where X is the number of hamsters you control. It's a bit better than Mer Battlesphere because Battlesphere required you to tap the creatures in order to get the damage effect, and that left you vulnerable to attackers. This doesn't make you do that. However, it has crew 3, meaning you have to tap creatures with a total power of 3 in order to animate this from an artifact into a creature. So has plus sides and downsides, but this scales a lot better than Mer Battlesphere because you make 3 per attack Versus Battlesphere, it's a one-off effect. It's an ETB trigger that puts in a bunch of 1/1s. I like it more for the scaling. Alchemist Talent. On the first level, you create 2 treasures. On the second level, you pay 1 red and colorless. Treasure Control have the sack ability to make 2 mana instead of 1. That's a significant trigger. It pays itself. On its third level, whenever you cast a spell, if mana from a treasure was spent to cast it, it deals damage equal to the current mana cost to each opponent. You're getting your investment back. This is the only class that will really hard accelerate yourself to that final level. Most people don't like level up abilities, but enchantments are pretty safe because it's a difficult to remove permanent type. Really good. I imagine this will be worth something upon release and even for time to come. Ooh, Wildseer Scoring Maw. It's a legendary creature, and enchantment spells from your hand have Cascade. If you ever wanted to build an Enchantress Gruul deck, which would be the first, now you get to cascade those spells. Very cool and unique. Very interested to see if someone builds this deck, or maybe I'll do it for the channel. Cascade's a very powerful effect. Casting stuff for free from the top of your library is always good. Elspeth Sun's Champion's getting a reprint. I have a little chibi version. I could see myself going to this. I don't know. I prefer a little mouse, I guess, over a chibi person. Whatever looks cuter, I guess. It's hard to beat a mouse, am I right? Fortune Teller's Talent, it's very similar to Future Sight. For the same amount of investment, you get that effect, with the exception it has a little bit of a clause. You have to cast a spell in order to start playing stuff off the top of your library. But once you hit level 3, which is a cheaper next level, you get to pay 2 less for your spells. So that's quite significant. After you cast 2 things, once you hit level 3, the level 3 pays for itself. Like the red one, I kind of like where you get your money back for making the investment, which is how it should be, in my opinion, because I feel like a lot of classes kind of suck. Polywog Prodigy, this is awesome. Evolve. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than his power, you draw a card. He'll be extremely good in competitive CDH kind of stuff because everyone's playing really cheap stuff. It's just more efficient to do it that way. And evolving this up to like 3 power ain't that hard to do. And I imagine that's the magic number when you start drawing cards. I wouldn't even mind playing this in a casual format to see how it does. Whenever you evolve something, you just have to play a creature that has higher power or toughness. Calamitous Cinders, this is a really good board wipe because it's one-sided. It has Convoke, and it does 6 damage to each untapped creature, so you pay its cost by tapping your own stuff. Get down, Mr. President! And you deal 6 damage to everything else. Pretty darn cool. Murmuration's really strong. Birds you control get +1/+1 and have Vigilance. At the beginning of your end step, for each spell you cast this turn, you create a bird token named Stormcrow. That can be a lot. EDH is all about who can cast the most spells in a turn, and who can see the most cards. An exponential amount of 2/3s. Jacked Rabbit.
If it ain't funny, it ain't worth jack.
It's just like Kicker. If you invest extra mana, you put counters on itself, so you don't even need to depend on artifacts and equipment if it's mid to late game. Not a bad deal. I think Jacked Rabbit's actually really strong. Like it a lot. I like its name. Very fitting. Agate Instigator. This is pretty good because it's basically Impact Tremors, but you can invest more mana to make copies of it. What's not to love about that? And it sees each other, so if you do the Offspring thing, the Agates will see each other and you'll do 2 damage just from casting this with its Offspring addition. Mr. Foxglove. I feel like this is a reference to Fantastic Mr. Fox. Whenever he attacks, you draw cards equal to number of cards in a defending player's hand minus the number of cards in your hand. So you want to be attacking the person with the most cards, and you have the fewest. If you didn't draw cards this way, you may put a creature card from your hand out of the battlefield. So you want to be playing big dumb creatures in this deck. You want to be cheating stuff into play because you get to circumvent costs. What I love about this thing is in the event that you don't have cards in hand, you draw instead. So it's a win-win regardless of what you do, and you don't have to connect. You just have to attack a particular person. So you can't even manipulate this. So like you could purposely attack opponent that has fewer cards than you, so you could dump a creature into play. I love the design on this card a lot. Really cool card. Communal Brewing. Normally I don't like cards that help your opponents, but this one's okay because it helps them in a very minute kind of way. You can allow any number of opponents to draw a card to put ingredient counters on this. In Commander, there's typically 3 opponents. You put a counter on it just by ETB, and then based on the number of opponents you allow to draw a card, you put an additional one. So max at 4, and whenever you cast a creature spell, it enters with an additional X +1/+1 counters, where X is the number of communal counters on this. It's like a communal kitchen if you ever lived in group living situations. I love the design. I love the thought, and it's super powerful. For 3 mana, I could safely say there's nothing in terms of rate that even compares. Letting people draw 1 card each so you could let your stuff come in with 4 extra power is extremely significant. I'd say the benefits way outweigh the drawback. 20-toed toad. I love it. Your max hand size is 20. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, you get to put a counter on it and draw a card. Whenever it attacks, you win the game if there are 20 more counters on it, if you have 20 more cards in hand. Counters is really abusable, so is the hand size. I think this will fit in multiple decks, the farm decks or the +1/+1 counter theme decks. It just depends on what is easier. It really only fits in when you're trying to do one or the other. If you're trying to do both, you will accomplish neither, if that makes sense. It requires a significant build around, and this is something you should shoehorn into the deck, but it's a win condition and it triggers on attack, so it doesn't have to deal damage, which is quite significant. This is Chandler. This guy's really cool. It's basically a Johnny Primate, but it's a bat. When you gain life, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then if you lost life this turn, you gain flying and vigilance. Vigilance is really nice aggro keyword ability because it means it will be up for blocking for the other 3 turns, and it will deter people from going for chip damage on you. And when it dies, you get to move its counters to something else, so you literally lose no investment. There's no downside to this card. Pretty awesome. Probably the best Johnny Primate we've ever gotten. Azure Beastbinder is really great. Can't be blocked by creature's power 2 or greater. When it attacks up to 1 artifact creature or planeswalker creature, loses all abilities and becomes a 2/2 creature till your next turn. It combos well with its unblockable ability. I think the greatest slap in the face is turning people's planeswalkers into a creature, because then they can never uptick their planeswalker. They can never use its abilities, and you could get in for free with this rat. It's pretty darn good for 2 mana. Caretaker sounds nice. Whenever a token enters, you draw a card. It only happens once a turn, so it's kind of like that artifact that taps itself. Leveling up only costs 1. You get to create a token copy of something, so it combos into itself at the first level. And then its final ability, creature tokens get +2/+2. Not bad. I mostly like the draw trigger the most about this enchantment. Toski's getting a full art treatment. That's pretty dope. Probably one of the most popular green cards, most played green cards in Magic, getting a full art treatment. It's never been done before. Was he missing his hand in the original art? I never noticed that. He's got little hook arms for a hand. Kind of want to confirm now. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to talk about spoilers. No, he does have a claw for a hand. Look at that. I never noticed that.
Groovy.
That's so cool. Now I want to read up the lore and why he's missing a hand. Pigeons and little critters missing toes or limbs happen all the time. If you ever go to any public place where there's a lot of pigeons, I guarantee you one of them's missing a foot. Sylvan Tutor's gonna reprint. Now this is reprinted in the Lord of the Rings holiday gift set where they did the old school rotoscope art. I like this more because it has a lot more color. It looks cooler. That's me personally though. What, do you guys like this more than the other one? That's the one from Lord of the Rings. Kindred Charge, this is a reprint too. Looks a lot better. You choose a creature type, and then for each creature of the chosen type, you create a token of it. It's usually used as a haymaker. Relentless Rats, they are doing this treatment for this and Rat Colony. I thought this is super weird. I want to say it's artificial inflation of the packs, because now people are going to be wanting to get 30-40 copies of this, and it's going to be much easier to pick these up than the Secret Lair ones, and that's going to drive the price of these packs up, I feel like. Would you guys agree? Yeah, that's what I thought too. I think these are going to drastically influence the price of packs. It's much higher than what you could get the full arts and the Secret Lair ones, that's for sure. And they look cool. This is probably the dopest full art Relentless Rat treatment we saw. Same with the Rat Colonies. Then again, Rat Colony hasn't gotten a full art treatment yet. Ledger Shredder, full art treatment, first of its kind. Looks pretty cool. Kind of reminds me of Owl from Winnie the Pooh, teaching everybody in its little tree. That's the rat colony version. Like Relentless Rats, you could have any number of copies of them. It's kind of strange that Wizards decided to do this. The design of a rat colony, they're like, let's take Relentless Rats and let's make a strictly better version. Who would rather play something for 3 mana over 2 mana? Probably nobody. CMC just trumps everything. You want to play the cheapest thing possible if it's just as effective. Kills people just as fast. Yeah, I can see why you want to reject it. It's really obnoxious because people want 30 copies of this and it's incredibly hard to get. If anything deserves to be rejected, it's probably shit like this. Swords of Plowshares, there are a couple super arts of this out there. There's the black and gold one that you got from Secret Lair. There is one super art of swords that are extremely rare. It's like $90. It's like a top 3 kind of card. This is the super art. Now, if you want to talk about Swords of Plowshares, I don't know if anything comes close. It's serialized, so that's probably why they're so expensive. Only 295 players out there can get a copy. I think it's the first time they ever done serialized gift promos. I was in the military, so I have a lot of like sentimental value to Swords to Plowshares. It tells a story about someone that has to move on with their lives, and every veteran that gets out has to deal with this kind of stuff. And it's a pretty big damn hurdle. See, it's been 5 years since I separated from the military, and I didn't quite fully get over it until fairly recently. It took me like 2 years. It's not an easy thing to do. Teferi the Time Traveler's in a full art. That looks pretty dope. I would say this Kaikar art looks a lot better than its previous super art. The last super art we got was a portrait, and I hate portrait art so friggin' much. It's like the laziest artwork that they could have put on a card. This tells a story. It likes to dance with fire spirits, which is the tokens it makes. Strictly a group hug card. I never personally played it as a commander. I've seen other people play it, but I'm not a big fan. Ishai is pretty cool too. This is the first super art we're getting of this. I play this all the time. He's really strong. Originally, it came with Rhea, where you preserve counters, kind of like the Ozolith. But lately, I've been playing him with the other bird that gives it pseudo Ward 3. And that's been really fun. I call it my Air Force One Garfield budget deck because every card is under $20. Get Rog Monster, that's pretty sick. I wonder if that's gotten a super art. Well, you could either get this cool looking version or you could get this thing.
Gee, let me think. Sure.
For $10, this is one of the best creatures in the game. It's also a CDH list because it combos with Dakmor Salvage. If you don't know how Dakmor Salvage works with Gig Monster, you go to cleanup phase when you have a full grip of cards. You ditch Dakmor Salvage, get Rock triggers, and the loop goes infinite until you want to stop. Then that's why it's the CDH list. Derivative Imperial Technician. I always associate this with stacks because you could untap permanents whenever something makes a connection with someone. So you want to usually combo this with like Winter Orb or Static Orb kind of stuff. And he himself is really safe because you circumvent tax by paying 4 mana. He's like one of the worst commanders to play against and someone that should make you sweat a little bit. Baleful Strix full art. Oh my god, this thing looks awesome. I just love that its feathers are falling off and it's being replaced by sticks. It's spider webs. That's the scariest Baleful Strix I've ever seen. Baleful Strix is so goddamn annoying. For 2 mana investment, you replace itself and then no one wants to attack into you because no one wants to trade down with this thing. And Queen's getting a full art treatment too. I think it's crazy that they're making the commander cards have full art. I haven't seen Ant Queen played in a long time, but it's still very powerful. A 2 mana sink to make a 1/1 body, it's rare. You don't see that on just anything. And you can take away games if you're built around mana sinks. The Marrow Gnar. All rats have fear. You could sack a rat to create X rat creature tokens for X number of rats you control. This is like the compounding interest of rats. He plays very similar to Krinko. A little worse because you have to go down to go up by sacking a rat, but you are given a evasion piece by giving all your rats fear. So I think the trade-off is still really good, and the 1 mana more is very negligible when compared to Krinko. You don't see these decks very much anymore. You still see a lot of Krinko, though. Stuff that's being jammed into collector packs. It does say Imagine Critters. Learning as we go. Well, folks, you can only get these in the collector boxes, unfortunately. I think it's a little weird that this rat has a rhinoceros horn as like a helmet. Not very tactically necessary, but it's there. Ink Eye's getting a full art too. Deals damage to a player. You get to steal someone's creature into play under your control. It has ninjutsu, so you could be kind of sneaky about it. Vakun Green Shell. This guy kind of reminds me of Nadu, where it wants you to be playing a bunch of creatures with different powers and toughnesses. So you get the Coiling Oracle effect, where you look at the top. If it's a land, you put it into play. If it's not, it goes in your hand. Very strong, though. And then it scales up, becomes a 6/8 if you have 10 or more lands. Narset Part of Veils, this guy's super good. It's great for the wheel combos, because you wheel and no one draws cards, while you do draw cards because of its static effect. Luminous Broodmoth. I like this version a lot more. The previous one was a Godzilla reference to Mothra. I just like the colors on this a lot more. It's super strong in that when something without flying dies, comes back to battlefield with a flying counter on it. Good for aristocrat strategies. It's also nice because it doesn't exile itself should it die the second time. So you could eventually get that stuff back and do this loop again. What do you like more, Mothman from Godzilla or that Mothman? I feel like they did Karn dirty. Everyone got to be an animal, but Karn got to be turned into a tree. What is this? And this is the one that turns off artifacts. That's probably one of the better ones. It makes me smile. It gives me a good laugh. As like cartoony as it looks, I still think it looks kind of cool. Birds of Paradise. This is the third super rare treatment we've gotten of it. Now it's a canary with a staff in its leg. It kind of reminds me of the latest Hayao Miyazaki movie, the antagonist like faction where canaries trying to eat people. That's what this reminds me of. Kingai Curator is pretty dope. You want to exile different card types to give him +4/+4 and trample. So if you pull it off, it becomes a 7/7. I think this is going to be a house in 60 card formats, or the green decks for sure. I'd play this even in Commander. I think that's a really awesome ability, and I appreciate that it scales. And it has evasion. Coiling Rebirth. Now this is one of the gift cards I actually liked. You get to return 2 things if you do the gift.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
One of the copies is a 1/1 instead, but normally you don't really care. You just want the ETB trigger or the activated ability or the death trigger, whatever it is. You're reanimating it for some other reason other than stat blocks. Dowerport Mage. I like this guy a lot too. Whenever one or more creatures you control leave the battlefield without drawing, or without dying, you draw a card. It's good for the flicker or bounce decks. I think most of the frogs have really sweet cantrip abilities. Most of the frogs in general in this set are my favorite across the board. The rabbits, the rats, and salamanders are pretty forgettable. Mind Whisker is kind of an interesting uncommon for 3 mana. You get the Surveil for 1, and then if you have Threshold, which is 7 more cards in your graveyard, creatures your opponent control get -1/-0. That's a nice static. Lyric Convocation. It has a Erebos activation at the bottom of the card. The only other card that has a 2 mana pay to life draw was the flip card from long ago. I think it was Rivals. That one flipped into a land, and it had the ability to sack a creature to gain life equal to toughness. So this is the 3rd iteration of that ability. And then it gets 2 additional abilities where if you're end step, if you gain life this turn, each opponent loses life. If you're end step, if you gained or lost, you make a bat. I feel like the middle ability extremely easy to do because all you have to do is draw a card and activate this to get a 1/1 blocker. In terms of mana efficiency, I like Jackdaw Savior. This guy's kind of cool. It's like the inverse of Broodmoth that we were talking about earlier. This cares about things with flying, dying, and power, versus Broodmoth cared about things that didn't have flying. Storm Splitter is weird. The pre-order prices for this thing is like $30. I don't see it. He is interesting. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery, you get to make a temporary copy of him. I'm thinking of all like the Zerda decks where they copy it and then you can target the copies of Storm Splitter here, and that's like the furthest I could imagine this thing going. You could use Sundial Infinite to save the clone copies, or Obeka does that too. Oh, Mutate's pretty fun too. Yeah, I could see that. If you could make an infinite amount of copies of this, it's like, who cares? Or a lethal amount of them. Power doesn't matter in that scenario. Rotmouth Viper is super strong. Cost reduction, you sack any number of permanents, cost 1 less for each of them. You put a blight counter on it on ETB or attack. Then for each blight counter on it, each opponent loses 4 life, and that player sacks an all-in permanent or discards a card. That's a lot. That's so much. This thing is pretty damn back-breaking. I love Bela the Haymaker. It's a bit of a pun. She's literally making hay in the fields, but she throws haymakers as well, like punches. Tap 2 tokens, 1 mana main color, that's super strong. Tap 3 on tap tokens, you draw a card, also super strong. Tap 4, you put 3 counters on her, and it gains trample till on a turn. I love the design in this card a lot. Naya in tokens is already an established archetype. She just makes that even stronger. Take your pick of what you want to play, but I like her a lot more than most. Just because it's card advantage from the zone and mana from the zone, and a win condition where you can super yourself up for a Voltron strat. Go wide with your tokens as well. Very flexible commander. I look at a Skittish Seer. Cast a creature 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain a life, and put a counter on her. Then you could tap for X mana to add any one color X's her power. Spend this only cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells X in their mana cost. Because Shoe Lane triggers on any creature regardless of power. But I mean, 3 mana versus 5 is quite significant. Shoe Lane also doesn't add mana. She doesn't have a way to bounce stuff though. It's a give and take kind of a card. I think it's a good competitor to Shoe Lane, and it enforces a good building restriction, or at least a creative one. If you've ever had an interest in building a mana value 4 or greater deck, she's probably it. Ooh, Darkstar Augur, I like this guy a lot. It's like a cracked out version of Bob or Dark Confidant. You can make a copy of it, and then the investment's like on par, because Bob only costs 2 mana. This would cost 4 to have copy and this come into play. I like to play with Reckless Abandon. Life's a resource, and when you have 40 of it, I abuse the living hell out of it. With the World Mine. World? I don't know how to pronounce world. It's like the Grixis version of Minsk and Boo. It's not as good as Minsk and Boo because it doesn't tie up your mana. I think something that'd be kind of funny is you could abuse things where you change creature typings. You play things like Conspiracy, Maskwood Nexus, and Arcane Adaptation, and make all your rats in your deck into snails as well. And then you just play your scaling rats like Rat Colony, so you could use its sack ability to shoot people and draw a bunch of cards. I'd like to see this as a Rat Colony list. And then the cards you draw from sacking a biggin replaces you with more rat colonies. It's not the low of that. Oh yeah, I love Kurkashin Mage. This one triggers on non-creature spells. I think this one and the lizard or other otter will be pretty nice. For an uncommon, this is awesome. Damn. Huskburster Swarm seems good. People play Grumag Angler in the shadow decks. I imagine they'll be playing Huskburster Swarm as well. A bigger body with more evasion and death touch. So no matter what, you'll be trading with 2 creatures with this thing if they want to deal with it. And that might even be good enough. That might be just so they could avoid taking 6 damage and keep their life totals high. It seems like a brutal card for like a modern format. And I also like that it cares about things in exile too. So people are trying to punish you by exiling your graveyard to counter you. It's not good enough. I like that the bats care about loss of life and gain of life. Very flavorful. This lets you look at the top 4 and then reveal creature card, power 3 or less from among them, put it in your hand. Good card selection, surprisingly an uncommon, pretty good for an uncommon. Dawn's Truce, this is the other gift card I liked. It's similar to Heroic Intervention, and you don't have to give the gift if you're just trying to dodge single target removal. And then in the event that you do, you just give it to the weakest player. I expect this to be pretty expensive. No matter how many times I reprint Heroic, it's always over $10. Infamous Cruel Claw, there's some like serious hype about this thing. It lets you cheat stuff off the top of your library by discarding card, but you have to connect. It has Menace, so it's easier to hit people. You have to be playing a deck that manipulates the top of your library. It's not something a black and red deck is known for doing. It also forces you to play some expensive tutors, which is unfortunate, but I'm willing to try and play it on the channel, even though I play budget decks. I just won't have access to the sweet tutors. Now, all I have to do is just jam a ton of creatures that are very powerful into the deck, but that makes the deck a little inconsistent. If those things end up in my hand and I can't play them, it's a little risky. Burrowguard Mentor is a pretty sweet uncommon. Power and toughness equal number of creatures you control, and it also has evasion with trample. Bren protects himself with ward 2, and then if something would die on your opponent's side, it gets exiled. Create X rats, and then it gets +1/+1 for each other rat you control, and X is equal to the number that get exiled. If you're able to kill a lot of things on other people's turns and take advantage of the every end step, that would be pretty kick-ass. Hard to do, but you're in black, so it can't be too terribly hard, am I right? Innkeeper's Talent as a class seems super strong. I remember back in Standard of, it was either Ixalan or Caverns where they had the Escort was a problem where weenies were dominating, because this also triggers at the beginning of combat and does the same thing of dumping a counter and scaling stuff up. So only now it levels up and makes shit even worse.
Feel the power.
Gives word, and then on the final level, you start putting additional counters on stuff. You twice it, actually. I feel like this is going to make us flash in standard. Dewdrop Cure is pretty nice. You return up to 2 creatures, mana value 2 or less for your graveyard to the battlefield. If the gift was paid, you return 3 instead. I'd play this in weenies all day. That seems really good. I don't know about Commander. I might play this in like your Luris decks. That's probably the only place this would fit. You avoid a lot of tempo issues by putting it directly back into play. Sunspine Link can't gain life, damage can't be prevented. On ETB, deals damage to each player equal to the number of non-basics that player controls. It's basically a price of progress on a stick. People are playing non-basics all the time. Probably way more than they should. The only time they're not is if they're in monocolored decks. And that's about it. Price of progress is strong. I imagine this will be strong, which is another topic I wanted to bring up. When people started branching out and being creative and playing multicolored decks, Wizards was applauding them. They're like, oh, we never thought of doing that. Now they have to print things like this every now and then. I think they still applaud creativity and they like seeing multicolored decks, but they have to be very careful about printing stuff like this because they don't want to undo a lot of creativity out there. Because if they print too many of these, then no one is ever going to want to be playing multicolored decks. Stormcatch Tormentor is really good. It's a strictly better Goblin Electromancer. Has prowess and haste. What's not to love about that? I like Cachet Grab. Any card where you mill 4 or more for 2 mana. In my 6 deck that I built and I'm going to be playing tonight, I play all of these. And this is a nice fit for the 6 decks. It acts like card advantage when you have access to your graveyard. I like Hop to It. Very rarely do we get a 1-for-1 investment. In this case, you invest a mana per 1 token you make. And believe it or not, there are not a lot out there. Some full art planeswalkers. I don't play Liliana of the Dark Realms that much, but I definitely play Nissa Who Shakes the World, that's for sure. That looks pretty dope. Bees of the Bounding Spring. This guy is kind of weird. It's supposed to be like a catch-up mechanic on an ETB trigger. Someone has more lands, you get a treasure. Someone has more life, you gain 4 life. Someone has more creatures, you get 2 1/1 tokens. Someone has more cards, you draw a card. I wish those effects applied to each opponent individually, but unfortunately, the max you can get is, 1 treasure, 2 fish, 4 life, and draw 1 card. That's a lot of stuff. If it's in the shell of flickering and abusing this, that could be pretty damn annoying. You're going to be cluttering up the board with a lot of fish at the very least. Valley Rock Caller is nice. Draw cards equal number of other squirrels, bats, lizards, and rats you control. So like whatever one you're doing tribal-wise, I'd put this in. That's a lot of cards. For the efficiency of 2 mana is pretty busted, and it's evasive, so it's hard to get rid of via combat. Season of Loss. I wanted to talk about this. I like all the season cards. There's one in each color. They're all unique in that they're modal, and the modes are inhibited based on these weird paw things that you get. They're not something you could bank, so you have to use it or lose it kind of a deal. But I like the black one the most because it impacts the board and it can win you the game. It's head and shoulders better than the other 4 by a lot. Could make people edict themselves or draw cards for the number of creatures you control that died. And then its last ability is you make people lose life for X number of creatures in your graveyard. Oh, what a bitch! Sword of Fire and Ice. Full art treatment. Is that the first? Pick and choose what you like more. I like my other one a little bit more than this. Sea Otters in South Park I love a lot. Why eat off of tables when you have perfectly good tummies? Jason Mind Sculptor, another full art treatment. He's gotten a couple in the past. Damn, that Tammy looks dope as hell. I just like the color of it all. The reflection of the water, it's reflecting a sunset. That's why you get this like golden glow. And it contrasts so well with the dock and the greenery and like the willow up here. I love whoever made this card a lot. Hazel the Root Bloom's pretty nice. Pay 2 life, tap X on tap tokens. Add X of any combination. That's a lot of mana, especially when you don't care about the tokens that you're making. Beginning of your end step, create a token that's a copy of a target token you control. If it's scroll, you make 2. Oh, damn. Zinnia gives all your creature spells offspring 2. Honestly, the middle paragraph means nothing to me. Sure, I could scale them up to be a lethal attacker. Just giving all my creature spells kicker is pretty kick-ass. I love that. This thing's pretty damn strong. And most Jeskai decks, they're Spellslinger decks, not creature decks. So that kind of partitions this color pairing into a new direction that I appreciate. Bellow Bard Brambles.
Try saying that 5 times faster.
I like that it's only during your turn. So if people want to blow up your animated artifacts or enchantments, they have to do it at instant speed. That's probably the best quality about this thing. And then on top of that, they draw you cards. And a 4/4 body is hard to deal with. The other stipulation is the Aura's enchantments have to be 4 or greater to cast. So unfortunately, this forces you more into the artifact line. Do a lot of affinity shenanigans. Yeah. Or vehicles. That's not bad either. But like, you could cheese expensive artifacts into play really easy. Cheesy and expensive enchantments, much harder to do. Especially in these colors, I feel like you need blue and white to abuse enchantments. Ral the Crackling Wit, you can excel his loyalty faster. He makes a body that protects himself, and then his -10 is backbreaking, which is what I like in a Planeswalker. I feel like getting to 10 loyalty is not that hard to do in the right decks. Maha. It's Feathers Knight. I love this card a lot. It's asymmetrical. It doesn't affect your board. I would pair this with things like the 4-drop enchantment that makes everything get -1/-1, or Karavek, which does the same thing. That's like the wet dream with this card. Pair it with things like the new Massacre Girl and all the stuff that like can reduce toughness to 0. You'd be drawing off of them. This is definitely a unique build around. I built a lot of black decks that didn't pan out well, but this one seems like fun. One of my favorite cards of all time is Humility. This is at least a third of what Humility does. Glarb, Calamity's Augur. 2/4 with Death Touch. Can look at the top of your library anytime. You may play lands or cast spells mana value 4 or greater from the top of your library. It's a future side effect, and it has Surveil with a tap ability, so you can manipulate the top of your library. Pretty darn awesome. You could also abuse this in like Tim decks and untap them and tap them again. There's a lot of those out there. I'd play this with the Intruder Alarm effects. You get to combine a lot of unique archetypes into one with this commander. Yes, it would work with X spells. You just have to make sure the X plus whatever cost is in it is 4 or greater. If you have a Villainous Wealth on the top of your library, you would only have to pay X as 1 because Villainous Wealth already has Sultai in its cost. But you could obviously cast Villainous Wealth for bigger, it being an X spell. Glarb is better because he doesn't care about it being a creature. I think the other frog cared about it being a creature because it distributed counters. This one does not care. Yeah, you could play non-creature spells too with this, which makes him significantly better. And with his like 2/4 bow with Death Touch, he just stuffs out so much obnoxious aggro, I bet. Castrol the Windcrested, I think this is the new like bird tribal commander, way better than what we've ever gotten in the past. Whenever one or more birds deal damage to a player, so the max you could get is 3 triggers off this. It's per player that you hit. Options: put a counter on each bird you control. That's pretty scary. Draw a card. Or you get to put a bird from your hand or graveyard with a finale counter on it. Honestly, I could see myself just putting 3 counters on everything. And then when I'm running out of gas, I do the card option. Pretty much everything you want in a tribal creature heavy deck. The 3-tree city, this is a significant card. Choose a color, add amount of mana equal to the number of creatures control the chosen type. So it's only going to be in tribal decks. This is going to be a must-have. It'll produce a lot of mana. And they're printing different versions of this. They're printing different like season versions. This is summer, spring, fall, and winter. Personally, I'm from Minnesota, and the winter one resonates more with me, so I like it. I have a lot of fun memories ice fishing. It's like my favorite thing to do recreation-wise outside. Walking on the ice, you just hear things for incredible distances. I would carve a hole out for my beer and a hole out for my fish, and most of the time I would just drink, and worst case scenario, I caught nothing and I just got lit on the ice.
And the air is just right for drinking.
It was the best. The winter one's way more expensive. It's like $10 more. Same with the fall one. I think it's because you could easily discern what the season is versus spring and summer. You can't. Salvation Swan is a weird angel effect. It does have flash, so it does just like what the angel does, but this one cares about flying and that you need it to not have flying. But it comes back with a flying counter on it, so that's neato. Damn. Bria Riptide Rogue is pretty damn good. I know this is one of the very first cards that they spoiled. Just giving everything prowess is pretty busted. Just make them unblockable whenever you cast something. Oh god. It's basically a Colonian Hydra from the command zone. That's what this is. Jesus. The scary rabbit soldier. I love Colonian Hydra. I missed when it was only $5 to play. Now it's expensive because people kind of caught on that Colonian Hydra's busted as hell. I would just play a creature deck where everything puts counter on itself and I would just ride this rabbit to victory. I love these effects where you get to return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield. He scales nicely too. Pretty darn good. If this was budget friendly, I'd played my 6th deck. That's the end, folks. Woo! That was a ride. I hope you enjoyed talking about spoilers. I went over anything that was worth buying. My sleeper pick from Bloomburrow. What do you think is going to be underappreciated value and will skyrocket? I got to look up prices now. Gotta go to TCG Player. We'll look up what's the cheapest. And then I'll be like, that's probably underpriced. I normally only buy singles from TCG Player. It's a competitive market. Card Kingdom just ignores. Let's see if I can find a diamond in the rough here. Dawn's Truce is only $5. You want your money card? That's my pick right there. Underpriced. Remember when I was telling you that like, no matter what, heroic intervention's always $10 plus.
How much clearer can I say? There's always money in the banana stand!
That's what this is gonna be. I have a feeling that it'll be double in price. Hope you all enjoyed. Take care now. Bye.